Welcome back to the Sharing English podcast, where we explore stories from the English-speaking world, spoken slowly and clearly for curious English learners like you. Let's get started. Hey everyone, it's your host, Freya. I want you to picture this. You're standing in a train station. You have a small suitcase, maybe a few personal belongings inside. You might be traveling alone or with family. You don't know exactly what your life will look like when you arrive, but you've decided to leave anyway. In the early 20th century, millions of Black Americans made that decision. This movement is known as the Great Migration. Between the 1910s and the 1970s, millions of people moved from the southern United States to cities in the north and west. It was one of the largest internal migrations in the country's history, and it changed the United States in lasting ways. To understand why this happened, we need to go back quite a bit further. After the American Civil War ended in 1865, slavery was abolished in the United States. The period that followed is known as Reconstruction. For a time, there was a real sense of possibility. Black Americans gained new rights and began to participate in political life. In fact, around 2,000 Black men were elected to public office in southern states. But that period was short-lived. Over time, there was a strong backlash. New systems were created to limit the rights of Black Americans. These included segregation laws known as Jim Crow laws, as well as restrictions on voting and widespread violence. By the early 1900s, many Black Americans in the South were living under conditions that limited their safety, their rights, and their opportunities. For many people, life in the South meant hard physical labor, often through a system called sharecropping. This work was difficult, and it rarely led to financial stability. At the same time, segregation laws controlled daily life, where people could go, where they could work, which drinking fountain they could use, and how they were treated. Violence and discrimination were constant realities. These are often called push factors, reasons that pushed people to leave. At the same time, there were new opportunities in other parts of the country. During and after World War I, factories in northern cities needed workers. Places like Chicago, Detroit, and New York City offered jobs, higher wages, and the possibility of a different kind of life. These are known as pull factors, reasons that attracted people to move. But it wasn't only about jobs. For many, it was about the hope for greater independence, dignity, and safety. The journey north was not simple. Many people traveled by train, sometimes for hundreds or even thousands of miles. They brought what they could carry. Some left family members behind, planning to reunite later. There was uncertainty in every step of the journey. People didn't always know what they would find, but they believed it could be better than what they were leaving. One of the people shaped by this movement was Langston Hughes. Hughes would go on to become one of the most important writers in American history, but his story is also connected to the movement of this time. As a young man, he traveled and eventually settled in New York City, in the neighborhood Harlem. There, he began writing about the lives, dreams, and struggles of Black Americans. His voice was direct, powerful, and deeply connected to the experiences of people living through this period. Hughes became a central figure in the Harlem Renaissance, a cultural movement that grew out of the communities formed during the Great Migration. In his writing, Hughes often focused on dreams, what people hoped for, even in difficult circumstances. In one of his most famous lines, he wrote, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly." Through his writing, we can better understand not just where people moved, but how they felt, what they hoped for, and how they made meaning out of their new lives. When people arrived in northern cities, they found new opportunities, but also new challenges. There were jobs in factories and industries. Communities began to grow, and people built new lives. But discrimination did not disappear. Housing was often crowded, and segregation still existed, even if it looked different from the South. So while life in the North could offer more opportunity, it was not free from difficulty. One of the most important outcomes of the Great Migration was its cultural impact. As millions of people moved, they brought their traditions, music, and ideas with them. Cities became centers of creativity. Music like jazz and blues grew in popularity. Literature, art, and performance reflected new experiences and perspectives. The Harlem Renaissance is one of the clearest examples of this cultural transformation, but something similar was happening in many cities across the country. Long term, the Great Migration reshaped the United States. It changed the population of cities, influenced culture, and played a role in future movements for civil rights. It helped create the urban communities and cultural landscapes that still exist today. Now let's go over a few key terms you heard during this story. Migration is the movement of people from one place to another. Segregation is the separation of groups, often by race. Opportunity, a chance for improvement. And urban, related to cities. The Great Migration helps explain a lot about why certain cities in the United States look and feel the way they do today. In later episodes, I will go through different cities of the United States and we'll learn more about their history and perhaps their connection to the Great Migration. But it also reminds us that history is made up of individual decisions. People choosing to move, to take risks, and to build new lives. So let's return to that image from the beginning. A person standing in a train station, holding everything they've decided to take with them. That moment of leaving, of uncertainty, of hope, was repeated millions of times. And together, those moments reshaped a country. So I'll leave you with this question. What would it take for you to leave your home and start over somewhere new? Let me know. Thanks for listening to the Sharing English podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, leave a rating or review, and share the podcast with a friend who's also learning English. You can find out more about me and the podcast at our website, www.sharing-english.com. New episodes of the Sharing English podcast are available weekly wherever you listen to podcasts. As always, let me know, what topics are you interested in hearing more about? Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep sharing English.